back to my reading of the Hobbit novel. So, what happened last time? Well, that was pretty memorable. Somebody killed Smoke. Somebody killed my boy. Like, he barely got to do anything constructive, and he was taken away from this world too soon. He was killed by Bard. Bard is a character that had a pretty important role in the movies, but in the book, he just really just popped out of nowhere and shot the dragon with a black arrow. So that happened. This entire time, this expedition has been looking forward to. Well, not seriously looking forward to it, but they have been expecting to meet Smaug and somehow battle him and take back the treasure. And they didn't get to do that. I mean, they Bilbo was the only one that really had a confrontation with Smaug of any kind. The others really just hid from the dragon all the time. So this is like extremely good luck for them, considering none of them has died yet, and they didn't really meet a lot of danger. I mean, there's been a lot of starving, there's been a lot of grumbling. It's certainly uncomfortable, but considering that you are about to face a dragon, this is probably the best outcome that they can hope for. Except that they don't know it yet. They probably didn't have to starve for the past few days because they didn't know the dragon was almost immediately taken down when he got to Lake Town. So I don't know what's gonna happen. Oh, actually, I do know what's gonna happen because I've seen the movies, but I don't know what's gonna be different from that. The Bard scenario is certainly different from the movies, and I can see, just having read the book this far, how the movies might have had a difficult time adapting the whole thing to the big screen. So, without further ado, I think I was halfway through the chapter where Smaug died last time. I'm gonna read the aftermath of the story now. Right. The waxing moon rose higher and higher, and the wind grew loud and cold. It twisted the white fog into bending pillars and hurrying clouds, and then drove it off to the west, to scatter in tattered shreds over the marshes before Mirkwood. Then the many boats could be seen dotted dark on the surface of the lake, and down the wind came the voices of the people of Esgaroth, lamenting the lost town and the goods and the ruined houses. But they had really much to be thankful for, had they thought of it, though it could hardly be expected that they should just then. Three-quarters of the people of the town had at least escaped alive. The woods and the fields and the pastures and the cattle and most of their boats remained undamaged, and the dragon was dead. What that meant they had not yet realized. They gathered in mournful crowds upon the western shores, shivering in the cold wind, and the first complaints and anger were against the master, who had left the town so soon, while some were still willing to defend it. He may have a good head for business, especially his own business, some murmured, but he is no good when anything serious happens. And they praised the courage of Bard and his last mighty shot. If one he had not been killed, they all said, we would make him king, Bard, the dragon shooter of the line of Girion. Alas, that he has lost. And in the very midst of their talk, a tall figure stepped from the shadows. He was drenched with water, his black hair hung wet over his face and the shoulders, and a fierce light was in his eyes. Bard is not lost, he cried. He dived from Esgaroth. I'm going to move this a little away from my mouth, just in case it gets too loud. He dived from Esgaroth, where the enemy was slain. I am Bard, of the line of Girion. I am the slayer of the dragon. King Bard, they shouted, but the master ground his chattering teeth. Girion was Lord of Dale, not King of Esgaroth, he said. In the Lake Town we have always elected masters from among the old and wise, and to have not endured the rule of mere fighting men. Let King Bard go back to his own kingdom. Dale is now freed by his valor, and nothing hinders his return. And any that wish can go with them, if they prefer the cold stones under the shadow of the mountain to the green shores of the lake. The wise will stay here and hope to rebuild our town and enjoy it again in time its peace and riches. We will have King Bard, the people near at hand shouted in reply. We have had enough of the old men and the money counters, and people further off took up the cry. Up the bowmen and down with money bags, till the clamor echoed along the shore. I am the last man to undervalue Bard the bowman, said the master wearily, for Bard now stood close beside him. He has tonight earned an eminent place in the roll of the benefactors of our town, and he is worthy of many imperishable songs. But why, O people? And here the master rose to his feet and spoke very loud and clear. Why do I get all your blame? For what fault am I to be deposed? Who aroused the dragon from his slumber, I might ask? Who obtained of us rich gifts and ample help, and led us to believe that all the songs could come true? Who played on our soft hearts and our pleasant fancies? What sort of gold have they sent down the river to reward us? Dragon fire and ruin. From whom should we claim the recompense of our damage, and aid for our widows and orphans? As you see, the master had not got his position for nothing. The result of his words was that for the moment the people quite forgot their idea of a new king, and turned their angry thoughts towards Thorin and his company. Wild and bitter words were shouted from many sides, and some of those who had before sung the old songs loudest were now heard as loudly crying that the dwarfs had stirred the dragon up against them deliberately. Fools, said the bard, why waste words and the wrath on those unhappy creatures? Doubtless they perished first in the fire before smoke came to us. That even as he was speaking, the thought came into his heart of the fabled treasure of the mountain lying without guard or owner, and he fell suddenly silent. He thought of the master's words and of Dale rebuilt and filled with golden bells. If he could but find the men. At length he spoke again. This is no time for angry words, master, or for considering weighty plans of change. There is work to do. I serve you still, though after a while I may think again of your words and go north with any that will follow me. Then he strolled off to help in the ordering of the camps and in the care of the sick and the wounded. But the master scowled at his back as he went, and remained sitting on the ground. He thought much, but said little, unless it was to call loudly for men to bring him fire and food. Now everywhere Bard went, he found talk running like fire among the people concerning the vast treasure that was now unguarded. Men spoke of the recompense for all their harm that they would soon get from it, and the wealth over and to spare with which to buy rich things from the south. And it cheered them greatly in their plight. That was as well, for the night was bitter and miserable. Shelters could be contrived for a few. The master had one, and there was little food. Even the master went short. Many took ill of wet and cold and sorrow that night, and afterwards died, who had escaped uninjured from the ruin of the town. And in the days that followed, there was much sickness and a great hunger. That sucks. That sucks if you just survived the dragon fire and then died of coldness. Meanwhile, Bard took the lead, and ordered things as he wished, though always in the master's name, and he had a hard task to govern the people, and direct the preparations for their protection and housing. Probably most of them would have perished in the winter that now hurried after autumn, if help had not been to hand. But help came swiftly, for Bard at once had a speedy messenger sent up the river to the forest, to ask the aid of the king of the elves of the wood, and these messengers had found a host already on the move, although it was then only the third day after the fall of Smaug. The Elven King had received the news from his own messengers and from the birds that loved his folk, and already knew much of what had happened. Very great indeed was the commotion among all things with wings that dwelt on the borders of the desolation of the dragon. The air was filled with circling flocks, and their swift flying messengers flew here and there across the sky. Above the borders of the forest there was whistling, crying, and piping. Far over Mirkwood the tidings spread. Smaug is dead! Leaves rustled and the startled ears were lifted. Even before the Elven King rolled forth the news had passed the west, right to the pine woods of the Misty Mountains. Beorn had heard it in his wooden house, and the goblins were at council in their caves. That will be the last we shall hear of Thorin Oakenshield, I fear, said the king. He would have done better to have remained my guest. It is an ill wind all the same, he added, that blows no one any good, for he too had not forgotten the length of the wealth of Thraw. So it was that Bard's messengers found him now marching with many spearmen and bowmen, and crowds were gathered thick above him, for they thought the war was awakening again, such as had not been in those parts for a long age. But the king, when he received the praise of Bard, had pity, for he was the lord of a good and kindly people. So turning his march, which had at first been direct towards the mountain, he hastened now down the river to the Long Lake. He had not boats or rafts enough for his host, and they were forced to go go the slower way by foot. But great store of foods he sent ahead by water. Still, elves are light-footed, and though they were not in these days much used to the marches and the treacherous lands between the forest and the lake, their going was swift. Only 5 days after the death of the dragon, they came upon the shores and looked on the ruins of the town. Their welcome was good, and as may be expected, and the men and their master were ready to make any bargain for the future in return for the Elven King's aid. Their plans were soon made. With the women and the children, the old and the unfit, the master remained behind, and with him were some men of crafts and many skilled elves, and they busied themselves felling trees and collecting the timber sent down from the forest. Then they set about raising many huts by the shore against the oncoming winter, and also under the master's direction they began the planning of a new town, designed more fair and large even than before, but not in the same place. They removed northward higher up the shore, for ever after they had the dread of the water where the dragon lay. He would never again return to his golden bed, but was stretched cold as stone, twisted upon the floor of the shallows. There for ages his huge bones could be seen in calm weather amid the ruined piles of the old town. But few dared to cross the cursed spot, and none dared to dive into the shivering water or recover the precious stones that fell from his rotting carcass. Well, it'd be like if maybe somebody could go collect some dragon, I don't know, parts of his skin, parts of his armor, those are really valuable. But all the men of arms who were still able, and most of the Elven King's array, got ready to march north to the mountain. It was thus that in 11 days from the ruin of the town, the head of their host passed the rock gates at the end of the lake and came into the desolate lands. End of chapter. So this chapter is wholly dedicated to Bard and the Smaug and the lake town, the Elven King. It's a bit of a overall world building. It's a nice change of pace. So obviously a lot happened in that chapter. Actually, too much had happened in that chapter. Like what the hell? It is kind of changes the whole thing very dramatically. So here we go. Continuing. Chapter 15: The Gathering of the Clouds. That does not bode well. Now we will return to Bilbo and the dwarves. All night, one of them had watched, but when morning came, they had not heard or seen any sign of danger. But ever more thickly the birds were gathering. Their companies came flying from the south, and the crows that still lived about the mountains were wheeling and crying unceasingly above. Something strange is happening, said Thorin. The time has gone for the autumn wanderings, and these are birds that dwell always in the land. There are starlings, the flocks of finches, and afar off there are many carrion birds as if a battle were afoot. Suddenly Bilbo pointed. There is the old thrush again, he cried. He seems to have escaped when Smaug smashed the mountainside, but I don't suppose the snails have. Sure enough, the old thrush was there, and as Bilbo pointed, he flew towards them and perched on a stone nearby. Then he fluttered his wings and sang. Then he cocked his head on one side as if to listen, and again he sang, and again he listened. I believe he is trying to tell us something, said Balin, but I cannot follow the speech of such birds. It is very quick and difficult. Can you make it out, Baggins? Not very well, said Bilbo. As a matter of fact, he could make nothing of it at all. But the old fellow seems very excited. I only wish he was a raven, said Balin. I thought you did not like them. You seemed very shy of them when we came this way before. Those are crows, and nasty, suspicious-looking creatures at that, and rude as well. You must have heard the ugly names they were calling after us. But the ravens are different. There used to be great friendship between them and the people of Thrall, and they often brought us secret news and were rewarded with such bright things as they coveted to hide in their dwellings. This is also Norse mythology, like ravens bring news. Just gonna grab some drinks. Who's talking now? I think that's still Balin. They live many a year, and their memories are long, and they hand on their wisdom to their children. I knew many among the ravens of the rocks when I was a dwarf lad. This very height was once named the Raven Hill, because there was a wise and a famous pair, old Cock and his wife, that lived here above the God Chamber. But I don't suppose that any of that ancient breed linger here now. No sooner had he finished speaking than the old thrush gave a loud call and immediately flew away. The thrush had to be like pissed. Like, I've been here making my report, and you guys are just talking about ravens. We may not understand him, but that old bird understands us, I'm sure, said the Balin. Keep watch now and see what happens. Before long there was a fluttering of wings, and back came the thrush, and with him came a more decrepit old bird. He was getting blind, he could hardly fly, and the top of his head was bald. He was an aged raven of great size. He alighted stiffly on the ground before them, slowly flapped his wings, and bobbed towards Thorin. Oh my god, he's actually talking. O Thorin, son of Thrain, and Balin, son of Funding, he croaked. And Bilbo could understand what he said, for he used ordinary language and not bird speech. I am Rock, son of Cock. Cock is dead, but he was well known to you once. It is 100 years and 350 since I came out of the egg. But I do not forget what my father told me. Now I am the chief of the great ravens of the mountain. We are few, but we remember still the king that was of old. Most of my people are abroad, for there are great tidings in the south. Some are tidings of joy to you, and some you will not think so good. Behold, the birds are gathering back again to the mountain and to dale from south and east and west, for word has gone out that Smaug is dead. Dead! Dead! Shouted the dwarves. Dead? Then we have been in needless fear, and the treasure is ours. They all sprang up and began to caper about for joy. Yes, dead, said the Roak. The thrush, may his feathers never fall. Oh, sorry. The thrush, may his feathers never fall, saw him die, and we may trust his words. We saw him fall in battle with the men of Esgaroth, and the third night back from now, at the rising of the moon. It was some time before Thorin could bring the dwarfs to be silent and listen to the raven's news. At length, when he had told all the tale of the battle, he went on. For so much joy, Thorin Oakenshield, you can go back to your horse in safety, for the treasure is yours for the moment. But many are gathering hither beside the birds. The news of the death of the Guardian has already gone far and wide, and the legend of the wealth of Thrall is not lost in the telling during many years. Many are eager for a share of the spoil. Already a host of the elves is on the way, and carrion birds are with them hoping for battle and slaughter. By the lakemen murmur that their sorrows are due to the dwarves, for they are homeless and many have died, and the Smaug has destroyed their town. They too think to find amends from your treasure whether you are alive or dead. Your own wisdom must decide your course, but 13 is a small remnant of the great folk of Durin that once dwelt here, and now are scattered far. If you will listen to my counsel, you will not trust the master of the lakemen, but rather him that shot the dragon with his bow. Bard is he of the race of Dale, of the line of Girion. He is a grim man but true. We will see peace once more among dwarves and men and elves after the long desolation, but it may cost you dear in gold. I have spoken. This is like the Mandalorian guy. I have spoken. Then Thorin burst forth in anger. Our thanks, Roak, Cog's son. You and your people shall not be forgotten. But none of our gold shall thieves take or the violent carry off while we are alive. If you would earn our thanks still more, bring us news of any that draw near. Also, I would beg of you, if any of you are still young and strong of wind, that you would send messengers to our king in the mountains of the north, both west and from here and east, and tell them of our plight. But go especially to my cousin Dane in the Iron Hills, for he has many people well armed, and dwells nearest to this place. Bid him hasten. I would not say if this counsel be good or bad, croaked the rock, but I will do what can be done. Then off he slowly flew. Back now to the mountain, cried Thorin. We have little time to lose. And little food to use, cried Bilbo, always practical on such points. In any case, he felt that the adventure was, properly speaking, over with the death of the dragon, in which he was much mistaken, and he would have given most of his share of the profits for the peaceful winding up of these affairs. Back to the mountain! Cried the dwarves as if they had not heard him, so back he had to go with them. People just wanna eat and sleep. You just want the basic hobbit happiness. As we all do. A while back there was this Middle Earth fan group on Facebook. Somebody posted a question, what would you be in the Middle Earth? And I said, my reply was a respectable hobbit. And as you know, a respectable hobbit basically means somebody who just eats, sleeps, tenders his own house and maybe garden, and just enjoy the lives. And if you want to be respectable, you don't go on adventures, you don't have any ambitions, and you just stay home and grow fat. That's what respectable means. I'll also be neighborly, of course. Eat like 7, 8 meals a day. Yeah, that's what I aspire to be if I was transported to the Middle Earth. Of course, the presumption is that I will be turned into a hobbit. I will make a perfect hobbit. Just if they just turn me into an elf or something, I might quite fail at that. Hmm. As you have heard some of the events already, you will see that the dwarves still had some days before them. They explored the caverns once more and found, as they expected, that only the front gate remained open. All the other gates, except of course the small secret door, had long ago been broken and blocked by Smaug, and no sign of them remained. So now they began to labor hard in fortifying the main entrance, and in making a new path that led from it. Tools were to be found in plenty that the miners and the quarriers and the builders of old had used, and at such work the dwarves were still very skilled. As they worked, the ravens brought them constant tidings. In this way, they learned that the elven king had turned aside to the lake, and they still had a breathing space. Better still, they heard that 3 of their ponies had escaped and were wandering wild far down the banks of the running river, not far from where the rest of their stores had been left. So while the others went on with their work, Filian and Kitty were sent, guided by a raven, to find the ponies to bring back all they could. They were 4 days gone, and by the time they knew that the joined armies of the Lakemen and the Elves were hurrying toward the mountain. But now their hopes were higher, for they had food for some weeks with care, chiefly cram, of course, but they were very tired of it, and they were very tired of it, but cram is much better than nothing. And already the gate was blocked with a wall of squared stones laid dry, but very thick and high across the opening. There were holes in the wall through which they could see or shoot, but no entrance. They climbed in and out with ladders and hauled the stuff up with ropes. For the issuing of the stream, they had contrived a small low arch under the new wall, but near the entrance they had so altered the narrow bed that a wide pool stretched from the mountain wall to the head of the fall, over which the stream went towards Dale. Approach to the gate was now only possible without swimming along a narrow ledge of the cliff to the right as one looked outwards from the wall. The ponies they had brought only to the head of the steps above the old bridge, and unloading them there had bidden them return to their masters and send them back riderless to the south. Aw, the poor ponies. I mean, I guess they wouldn't have anything to feed them anyway, so they might as well be. They would be better off in the wild than stuck in the castle with them. There came a night when suddenly there were many lights as of fires and the torches away south in Dale before them. They have come, called Balin, and their camp is very great. They must have come into the valley under the cover of dusk along both banks of the river. That night the dwarfs slept little. The morning was still pale when they saw a company approaching. From behind their wall they watched them come up to the valley's head and climb slowly up. Before long they could see that both men of the lake armed, as if for war, and the elvish bowmen were among them. At length the foremost of these climbed the tumbled rocks and appeared at the top of the falls, and very great was their surprise to see the pool before them, and the gate blocked with a wall of new hewn stone. I never could quite work out how to pronounce the word hewn, Hewn. I know what it means, but just it's not the kind of word that you hear people speaking out loud. As they stood pointing and speaking to one another, Thorin hailed them. Who are you? He called in a very loud voice. That come as if in war to the gates of Thorin, son of Thrain, king under the mountain, and what do you desire? But they answered nothing. Some turned swiftly back, and the others, after gazing for a while at the gate and its defenses, soon followed them. That day the camp was moved to the east of the river, right between the arms of the mountain. The rocks echoed them with voices and with song, as they had not done for many a day. There was the sound, too, of elven harps and of sweet music, and as it echoed up towards them, it seemed that the chill of the air was warmed, and they caught faintly the fragrance of woodland flowers blossoming in spring. Ah, they just made camps, right? They didn't even answer it. I guess they didn't expect to find anybody alive in there. Then Bilbo longed to escape from the dark fortress and to go down and join in the mirth and the feasting by the fires. Some of the younger dwarfs were moved in their hearts too, and they muttered that they wished things had fallen out otherwise, and that they might welcome such folk as friends, but Thorin scolded. Then the dwarfs themselves brought forth harps and instruments regained from the hoard, and made music to soften his mood. But the song was not as elvish song, and was much like the song they had sang long before in Bilbo's little hobbit hole. Really? Is it like a similar song? Shall I give it the same tunes? Let me try. I don't know if this is gonna work. Under the mountain, dark and tall, the king has come unto his home. His foe is dead, the worm of dread, and ever so his foes shall fall. Okay, it kind of works. The sword is sharp, the spear is long, the arrow swift, the gate is strong. The heart is bold, the looks on gold. The dwarfs no more shall suffer wrong. The dwarfs of yore made mighty spells, while hammers fell like ringing bells. In places deep where dark things sleep, in hollow halls beneath the fells, on silver necklaces they strung, the light of stars on crowns they hung. The dragon fire from twisted wire, the melody of harps they run. The mountain throne once more is freed. O wandering foe, the summer's heat, come haste across the waste. The King of friend and King has need. Now call we over mountains cold. Come back unto the caverns old. Here at the gates the King awaits. His hands are rich with gems and gold. The King is come unto this home, under the mountain dark and tall. The worm of dread is slain and dead, and ever so our foes shall fall. The song appeared to please Thorin. I guess I sound that wrong. There's no way that my version is gonna please anyone. This song appeared to please Thorin, and he smiled again and grew merry, and he began reckoning the distance to the Iron Hills and how long it would be before Dane could reach that lonely mountain, if he had set out as soon as the message reached him. But Bilbo's heart fell, both at the song and the talk. It sounded much too warlike. The next morning early, a company of spearmen was seen crossing the river and marching up the valley. They bore with them the green banner of the Elven King and the blue banner of the lake, and they advanced until they stood right before the wall of the gate. Again Thorin hailed them in a loud voice. "Who are you that come armed for war to the gates of Thorin, son of Thrain, king under the mountain?" This time he was answered. A tall man stood forward, dark of hair and grim of face, and he cried, "Hail Thorin! Why do you fancy yourself like a robber in this hold? We are not yet foes, and we rejoice that you are alive beyond our hope. We came expecting to find none living here, yet now that we are met, there is matter for a parley in the council." "Who are you, and of what would you parley?" "I am Bard, and by my hand was the dragon slain and your treasure delivered. Is that not a matter that concerns you? Moreover, I am by right descendant the heir of Girion of Dale, and in your hold is mingled much of the wealth of his halls and towns, which of old Smaug stole. Is that not a matter of which we may speak? Further, in his last battle Smaug destroyed the dwellings of the men of Esgaroth, and I am yet the servant of their master. I will speak for him and ask whether you have no thought for the sorrow and the misery of his people. They aided you in your distress, and the recompense you have thus far brought ruin only, though doubtless undesigned." Now these were fair words and true if proudly and grimly spoken, and Bilbo thought that Thorin would at once admit what justice was in them. He did not of course expect that anyone would remember that it was he who discovered all by himself the dragon's weak spot, and that was just as well, for no one ever did. But also he did not reckon with the power that gold has upon which a dragon has long brooded, nor with dwarvish hearts. Let me read that one again. But also he did not reckon with the power that gold has upon which a dragon has long brooded, nor with dwarvish hearts. That was a good line. That was a great line. Long hours in the past days Thorin had spent in the treasury, and the lust of it was heavy on him. Though he had hunted chiefly for the Arkenstone, yet he had an eye for many another wonderful things that was lying there, about which were wound old memories of the labors and the sorrows of his race. "You put your worst cause last, and in the chief place," Thorin answered. "To the treasure of my people no man has a claim, because Smaug, who stole it from us, also robbed him of life or home. The treasure was not his, that his evil deeds should be amended with a share of it. The price of the goods and the assistance that we received of the lakemen we will fairly pay in due time, but nothing will we give, not even loaves worth, and the threat of force. While an armed host lies before our doors, we look on you as foes and thieves. It is in my mind to ask what share of the who's saying this? Oh, it is in my mind to ask what share of the inheritance you would have paid to our kindred had you found the hoard unguarded and us slain. A just question, replied Bard. But you are not dead, and we are not robbers. Moreover, the wealthy may have pity beyond right on the needy that befriended them when they were in want, and still my other claims remain unanswered. I will not parley, as I have said, with armed men at my gate, not at all with the people of the Elven King, whom I remember with small kindness. In this debate they have no place. Be gone now, ere our arrows fly. And if you would speak with me again, first dismiss the elvish host to the woods where it belongs, and then return, laying down your arms before you approach the threshold. The Elven King is my friend, and he has succored the people of the lake in their need, though they had no claim but friendship on him, answered Bard. We will give you time to repent your words. Gather your wisdom ere we return. Then he departed and went back to the camp. Ere many hours were passed, the banner bearers returned and the trumpeter stood forth and blew a blast. Ooh, things are escalating really fast. Thorin, just pay them something. You have a whole... Well, it's always easy to assume that because you have so much money, it would be easy to depart some portion of it. That's almost never how it works, is it? In the name of Askaroth and the forest, one cried, we speak unto Thorin, Thrain's son Oakenshield, calling himself the king under the mountain, and we bid him consider well the claims that have been urged, or be declared our foe. At the least he shall deliver 1/12th portion of the treasure unto Bard, as the dragon slayer and as the heir of Girion. From that portion Bard will himself contribute to the aid of Askaroth. But if Thorin would have the friendship and honor of the lands about as his sires had of old, then he will give also somewhat of his own for the comfort of the men of the lake. Then Thorin seized a bowl of horn and shot an arrow at the speaker. It smote into his shield and stuck there quivering. Since such is your answer, he called in return, I declare the mountain besieged. You shall not depart from it until you call on your side for a truce and a parley. Oh, this is the speaker. Since such is your answer, he called in return, I declare the mountain besieged. You shall not depart from it until you call on your side for a truce and a parley. We will bear no weapons against you, but we leave you to your gold. You may eat that if you will. With that, the messengers departed swiftly, and the dwarves were left to consider the case. So grim had Thorin become that even if they had wished, the others would not have dared to find fault with him. But indeed, most of them seemed to share his mind, except perhaps old fat Bomber and Fili Killy. Bilbo, of course, disapproved of the whole turn of affairs. He had by now had more than enough of the mountain, and being besieged inside it was not at all to his taste. The whole place still stinks of dragon, he grumbled to himself, and it makes me sick, and the cram is beginning simply to stick in my throat. Oh, end of another chapter. That was a short one. Let's keep going. This is getting really spicy. So we have chapter 16, A Thief in the Night. Now the days passed slowly and wearily. Many of the dwarves spent their time piling and ordering the treasure, and now Thorin spoke of the Arkenstone of Thrain, and bade them eagerly to look for it in every corner. For the Arkenstone of my father, he said, is worth more than a river of gold in itself, and to me it is beyond price. That stone of all the treasure I name unto myself, and I will be avenged on anyone who finds it and withholds it. Bilbo heard these words, and he grew afraid, wondering what would happen if the stone was found, wrapped in an old bundle of tattered oddments that he used as a pillow. All the same, he did not speak of it, for as the weariness of the days grew heavier, the beginnings of a plan had come into his little head. Things had gone on like this for some time, when the ravens brought news that Dane and more than 500 dwarves, hurrying from the Iron Hills, were now within about 2 days' march of Dale, coming from the northeast. But they cannot reach the mountain unmarked, said the rock, and I fear lest there be battle in the valley. I do not call this council good. Though they are grim folk, they are not likely to overcome the host that besets you. And even if they did so, what will you gain? Winter and the snow is hastening behind them. How shall you be fed without the friendship and goodwill of the lands about you? The treasure is likely to be your death, though the dragon is no more. But the Thorin was not moved. Winter and the snow will bite both men and elves, he said, and they may find their dwelling in the waste grievous to bear. With my friends behind them and winter upon them, they will perhaps be in softer mood to parley with. That night, Bilbo made up his mind. The sky was black and moonless. As soon as it was full dark, he went to a corner of an inner chamber just within the gate and drew from his bundle a rope, and also the Arkenstone wrapped in a rag. Then he climbed to the top of the wall. Only Bombur was there, for it was his turn to watch, and the dwarves kept only one watchman at a time. It is mighty cold, said Bombur. I wish we could have a fire up here as they have in the camp. It is warm inside. It is warm enough inside, said Bilbo. I dare say, but I am bound here till midnight, grumbled the fat dwarf. A sorry business altogether. Not that I venture to disagree with Thorin, may his beard grow ever longer. Yet he was ever a dwarf with a stiff neck. Not as stiff as my legs, said Bilbo. I'm tired of stairs and stone passages. I would give a good deal for the feel of grass at my toes. I would give a good deal for the feel of a strong drink in my throat and for a soft bed after a good supper. I can't give you those while the siege is going on. But it is long since I watched. But it is long since I watched, and I will take your turn for you, if you like. There is no sleeping me tonight. You are a good fellow, Mr. Parkins, and I will take your offer kindly. If there should be anything to note, rouse me first, mind you. I will lie in the inner chamber to the left, not far away. Off you go, said Bilbo. I will wake you at midnight, and you can wake the next watchman. As soon as Bombur had gone, Bilbo put on his ring, fastened his robe, slipped down over the wall, and was gone. He had about 5 hours before him. Bombur would sleep. He could sleep at any time, and ever since the adventure in the forest, he was always trying to recapture the beautiful dreams he had then. And all the others were busy with Thorin. It was unlikely that any, even Fili or Kili, would come out on the wall until it was their turn. It was very dark, and the road, after a while, where he left the newly made path and climbed down towards the lower course of the stream, was strange to him. At last he came to the bend where he had to cross the water, if he was to make for the camp as he wished. The bed of the stream was there shallow but already broad, and the fording it in the dark was not easy for the little hobbit. It was nearly across when he missed his footing on a round stone and fell into the cold water with a splash. He had barely scrambled out on the far bank, shivering and spluttering, when up came elves in the gloom with bright lanterns in a search for the cause of the noise. That was no fish, one said. There is a spy about. Hide your lights. They will help him more than us, if it is that queer little creature that is said to be their servant. Servant, indeed, snorted Bilbo, and in the middle of his snort he sneezed loudly, and the elves immediately gathered towards the sound. Let's have a light. Oh, let's have a light, he said. I'm here if you want me. And he slipped off his ring and popped from behind a rock. They seized him quickly in spite of their surprise. Who are you? Are you the dwarf's hobbit? What are you doing? How did you get so far past those sentinels? They asked one after another. I am Mr. Bilbo Baggins, he answered. Companion of Thorin, if you want to know. I know your king well by sight, though perhaps he doesn't know me to look at. But Bard will remember me, and it is Bard I particularly want to see. Indeed, said they. And what may be your business? Whatever it is, it's my own, my good elves. But if you wish ever to get back to your own woods from this cold, cheerless place, he answered, shivering, you will take me along quick to a fire where I can dry, and then you will let me speak to your chiefs as quick as may be. I have only an hour or two to spare. Bilbo, taking up the responsibilities. The responsibilities have grown like way beyond just Thorin and his company at this point. It's like keeping the peace now. This is how it came about. The some 2 hours after you escaped from the gate, Bilbo was sitting beside a warm fire in front of a large tent, and there sat two, gazing curiously at him, both the Elven King and Bard, a hobbit in elvish armor, partly wrapped in an old blanket, was something new to them. Really, Bilbo was saying in his best business manner, things are impossible. Personally, I am tired of the whole affair. I wish I was back in the West in my own home, where folk are more reasonable. But I have an interest in this matter, 1/14th share to be precise, according to a letter, which fortunately I believe I have kept. He drew from a pocket in his old jacket, which he still wore over his mail, crumpled and much folded, Thorin's letter that had been put under the clock on his mantelpiece in May. Really, that the same piece of paper survived all of this, survived the goblin hole, the dragon, and the spiders. Did he never fall into water? Didn't he have to swim? He did. He had to swim during their escape from the elves. How is the water still intact? But I mean, how is the letter still there? How did that survive that? A share in the profits, mind you, he went on. I'm aware of that. Personally, I'm only too ready to consider all your claims carefully and deduct what is right from the total before putting in my own claim. However, you don't know Thorin Oakenshield as well as I do now. I assure you he is quite ready to sit on the heap of gold and starve, as long as you sit here. Well, let him, said the bard. Such a fool deserves to starve. Quite so, said Bilbo. I see your point of view. At the same time, winter's coming on fast. Before long, you will be having snow and whatnot, and the supplies will be difficult, even for elves, I imagine. Also, there will be other difficulties. You have not heard of Dane and the dwarves of the Iron Hills? We have a we have a long time ago, but what has he got to do with us? Asked the king. Ah, I thought as much. I see I have some information you may not have. Dane, I may tell you, is now less than 2 days' march off, and has at least 500 grim dwarves with him. A good many of them have had experience in the dreadful dwarf and the goblin wars, of which you have no doubt heard. When they arrive, there may be serious trouble. Why do you tell us this? Are you betraying your friends or are you threatening us? Asked the bard grimly. My dear bard, squeaked Bilbo, don't be so hasty. I never met such suspicious folk. I'm merely trying to avoid trouble for all concerned, though I will make you an offer. Let us hear it, he said. You may see it, said he. It is this, and he drew forth the Arkenstone and threw away the wrapping. The Elven King himself, whose eyes were used to things of wonder and beauty, stood up in amazement. Even Bard gazed marveling at it in silence. It was as if a globe had been filled with moonlight, and hang before them in the wet woven of the glint of frosty stars. This is the Arkenstone of Thrain, said Bilbo, the heart of the mountain, and it is also the heart of Thorin. He values it above a river of gold. I give it to you. It will aid you in your bargaining. That Bilbo, not without a shudder, not without a glance of longing, handed the marvelous stone to Bard, and he held it in his hand as though dazed. But how is it yours to give? He asked at last with an effort. Oh, well, said the hobbit uncomfortably. It isn't exactly, but, well, I'm willing to let it stand against all my claim, don't you know? I may be a burglar, or so they say. Personally, I never really felt like one. But I am an honest one, I hope, more or less. Anyway, I'm going back now, and the dwarves can do what they like to me. I hope you will find it useful. The Elven King looked at Bilbo with a new wonder. Bilbo Baggins, he said, you are more worthy to wear the armor of elf princes than many that have looked more comely in it. But I wonder if Thorin Oakenshield will see it so. I have more knowledge of dwarves in general than you have, perhaps. I advise you to remain with us, and here you shall be honored and thrice welcome. Thank you very much, I'm sure, said Bilbo with a bow. But I don't think I ought to leave my friends like this, after all we have gone through together. And I promise to wake old Bumber at midnight too. Really, I must be going, and quickly. Nothing they could say would stop him, so an escort was provided for him, and as he went, both the king and the bard saluted him with honor. As they passed through the camp, an old man wrapped in a dark cloak rose from a tent door where he was sitting and came towards him. He's back. Well done, Mr. Baggins, he said, clapping Bilbo on the back. There is always more about you than anyone expects. It was Gandalf. For the first time for many a day, Bilbo was really delighted, for there was no time for all the questions that he immediately wished to ask. All in good time, said Gandalf. Things are drawing towards the end now, unless I am mistaken. There is an unpleasant time just in front of you, but keep your heart up. You may come through all night. You may come through all right. There is news brewing that even the ravens have not heard. Good night. Puzzled but cheered, Bilbo hurried on. He was guided to a safe ford and set across dry, and then he said farewell to the elves and climbed carefully back towards the gate. Great weariness began to overcome him, but it was well before midnight when he clambered up the rope again. It was still where he had left it. He untied it and hid it, and then he sat down on the wall and wondered anxiously what would happen next. At midnight he woke up Bomber, and then in a hurry rolled himself up in his corner, without listening to the old dwarf's thanks, which he felt he had hardly earned. He was soon fast asleep, forgetting all his worries till the morning. As a matter of fact, he was dreaming of eggs and bacon. Yay, Gandalf's back. Because these are like very exciting chapters that I'm going through here. But I feel like this is. I could go on. I really want to go. I really want to go on. I want to read on until the very end of the book, as a matter of fact. But I feel like this is a good place to stop for now, just because my throat really kills me after an hour of intensive reading. I'd see some other people like YouTubers that they could read stuff in for a very long time. They could go very long, an hour and a half, 2 hours, and things like that. I find it like impossible to do it on my own. Also, there were like a lot of hosts, podcasters. I really like the John Campea show where he talks about the movies, and this dude just goes on and on about. He's not reading anything in particular, but he's constantly talking. I mean, sometimes he has guests, sometimes he doesn't, but he's always talking almost very loudly at the top of his voice, almost. And the show could last 2 hours, 3 hours long, each day in day out. I mean, except the weekends. Weekends he does other stuff, but he still appears in front of the camera, still makes his speeches, and then still answers all the sorts of questions. Still talks all the time in front of the camera. I mean, there are moments where he also feels strains on his vocals, but that's always after like 2 3 hours. I really admire that because mine is like already gone. Just it just doesn't sustain at all. So anyway, this has been The Hobbit. We're going to start with chapter 17 the next time, and I'm really excited now. Again, I feel like I feel like a little bit robbed about the manner where Smaug was taken down, but like things are really amping up, and I kind of really like this aspect in the novel where people are just being jerks to each other because of their lust and greediness. Um, well, just some more than others. Thorin is pretty much completely in the wrong here. Bard has a honest claim on the treasure, I believe, but the Elven King, I don't know what the hell any of this has to do with him. And Bilbo is just being the ultimate peacekeeper for all of this stuff. And it's notable that Bilbo is just quickly climbing the ladders in the Middle Earth. Like the Hobbit is supposed to be the most inconspicuous race of all peoples. Like most people don't even know them. They just live in their own little circles. They don't do adventures. They don't affect the over overworld stuff. But Bilbo, I mean, whenever they do set out in the world, they probably look down because they're like small, useless. They're not good fighters. They're not particularly smart. But Bilbo is gaining the respect of everybody. Gandalf was the only one at the beginning to have any real respect in these worldly matters about him, more so than even he had of himself. Gandalf was the only one to have a high opinion of him in anything, and right now I'd say Bilbo himself is the only one that still has such a humble opinion of him. Everybody else uh, really likes him and respects him and honors him. The dwarves certainly so by this point because Bilbo has been helping them so much on the journey. And now Bard and the Elven King who has a fucking oak tree up his ass is now saluting Bilbo. It this is amazing, and I kind of now I kind of understand that some of the complaints people have about the movies about injecting the orc plot. I mean, the orc stuff and necromancer things they tie into the Lord of the Rings movies more. So I guess it makes sense in that regard, and it does go spice up a little bit of drama between good and bad epic battles in the Lord of the Rings way. But it kind of deviates the I don't know the message of the story a little bit. It just to give it a bit of a clear cut villain in this otherwise could have been a more complicated and shady nature of the outcome. I, I f- I feel like the novel is kind of making up for the abrupt endness, well, the abrupt ending of a Smaug. It's kind of trying to amp up other aspects, the drama, the character conflicts, and yeah, this is good stuff. I still wish there was more with the we got more from Smaug, but this is looking quite good. But of course, when we talk about the high opinion of Bilbo from the dwarves, that's probably not gonna last. Not after they discover what he did with the Arkenstone. So Bilbo is really just a little guy that's trying to survive, trying to do the right thing, trying to be able to go back to his comfortable way of life after achieving something, and he just kind of happened to be saving everybody on the way. And I guess that's what heroes really are. So this has been good fun, and thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Next time. I'm reading this live on Twitch, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you're welcome to follow me on Twitch. The name of my Twitch is Sword of Laser. Anyway, anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. After and we can finally get to the maybe get to the end of the novel to see how and in what manner this story concludes. Thanks again, and see you next time.